This tape is from the Shabbos Farbrengen, a Parshas Tavo. Chai Elul, Tavshin Daled Mem, September 15, 1984. This tape is said from memory by Rabbi Zev Katz and produced by Chazarah tapes in English.
Gute Woche. The Rebbe Zolder began the Farbrengen this afternoon that today is Chai Elul. Chai Elul, it is known, it is the birthday. The Rebbe used the expression of the Shnei HaMa'oros HaGdolim, of the two sources of light and illumination, referring to the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, of both of whose birthday is on Chai Elul. Bechlal, this is something which is meaningful to all of Klal Yisrael, being that they were in the Siyam, and how much more so does it have a meaning to those who are considered as their disciples and following in their footsteps, and in the ways that they have introduced, meaning that they have these Yidden, us Yidden, have a special shaykhs to this day, to this outstanding and great day of Chai Elul. And being, the Rebbe went on, that this is a day which comes only once a year, we must say that it has an effect on the entire year until the next Chai Elul to come. In other words, use the expression, it's an achas bashana. Just like we find the Negei Yom Kippur, the expression achas bashana, the same would apply here. It's something which is only once a year, and therefore it has an effect on the entire year. As far as we are concerned, what do we have to derive from all of these inyanim? The Rebbe kept on stressing, it's ha'maisa hu ha'ikar. We have to derive from this an increase in maisa, in deed and in act, to increase our maisim. And this is what this day has to remind us, and this is what this day stands for. Here the Rebbe quoted from the Tavo Sarivosh, which is a sefer from the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem Tov tells us that the avodas Hashem of every Yid has to be in a way of avodah tama. That's the expression the Baal Shem uses. Avodah tama meaning a sincere and hearty avodah in avodas Hashem. Tam, same idea, the same word as tmimus, as tamim. So we see on one hand, the Yid is required an avodah tama, an avodah, a tmimistic avodah. On the other hand, we find in Chassidus, how Chassidus stresses the greatness of great and high madrigas and great and high avodas, how one dedicates himself solely to the avodas Hashem. However, what we see from this is that the main thing again is ha'maisa hu ha'ikar. And where is ha'maisa hu ha'ikar reflected? In the avodah tama, in the sincere and total tmimis, which a Yid serves the Rebishter with. This is where he gives himself over completely, and this is where it is seen the highest level of avodah. And that is why it's explained, person possesses three lavusha, machshava, dibur, and maisa. And maisa again is the one which is where he brings down everything into action, and this is the most chashava of all. Though machshava is something which is much edler and much finer than maisa at times, however, where does he bring out everything into action, everything into practicality? All of this is reflected in maisa. One cannot suffice his avodas Hashem through machshava. It will be meaningless. In other words, how great his machshava may be and how great his way of thought and thinking may be. However, as far as fulfilling mitzvahs and as far as fulfilling ha'maisa hu ha'ikar, he is not doing it if he's not bringing it down into maisa, if he's not bringing it down into action. And the Rebbe tied together this expression from the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem uses the expression that he uses to service HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a format of avodah tama. There's an expression in Gemara where the Gemara discusses karbonis. And there the Gemara uses the expression avodah tama, that there is, by karbonis, there is an avodah tama and there is not an avodah tama. What is the difference? The Gemara explains in a different sense. Avodah tama means a complete avodah. Avodah tama, she'ein acharei avodah. It is complete, that nothing else has to be done to the korban after these parts of the avodah have been done. Avodah she'ein tama means an avodah which is incomplete, and other parts still have to be done, other inyana avodah have to be done to the korban. It is incomplete yet. Melo, what we see here is that this Avodah Tama, which the Baal Shem Tov is talking about, how a Yid is supposed to dien the Rebishter with tmimus, with his complete sincerity, uses the same expression, Avodah Tama. In other words, this is an Avodah she'ein achareh Avodah. There is nothing higher than that. This is the highest level in Avodah Hashem, is this Avodah Tama, which Tamim Tiyem Hashem Elokecha, which the Baal Shem Tov instructs us how we are supposed to be servicing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is in this Avodah Tama. And it's also reflected in today's Sedra. Today's Sedra deals, the beginning of the Sedra primarily deals with the Bikurim. Bikurim are the first fruit of the Peiros Shenishtatcha ben Eretz Yisrael. In other words, the first of the best fruit which have been grown in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael in itself is the chosen land of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Medrash tells us that Mishabacha b'Yakov u'banav, as soon as HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen Yaakov and his children to be his nation, at the same time the Rebbe has chosen Eretz Yisrael to be our country. And here we are talking, in Eretz Yisrael Gufa comes the first and the best fruit. A Yid is supposed to take that. Mishnah tells us, Rashi tells us about it also. If one sees Peri Shebikha, as soon as he sees that a fruit is getting ripe, again he has to tie a little rope around it, and this Peri is a sign that this is going to bring for Bikurim. Then the pasuk goes on, the Samta Batene. When he comes to the Beis Hamikdash, what does he have to take it and put it into a basket? Here the Rebbe stressed that this basket was a very simple basket. It wasn't any beautiful type of a basket. It wasn't a kli kesef, it wasn't a kli zahav. It was simple vessel, simple keli, and this is where the Bikurim were put into. And again also, what do we see in this Sedra? That everything has to be reflected in Maisa. In other words, Hamaisa Huayika, taking the Bikurim and bringing them to the Beis Hamikdash. It is also Shabbos. In Shabbos we also find two contrasting inyanim. On one hand we find that a Yid is constantly supposed to be preparing for Shabbos. The Ramban tells us that by us saying every day, Hayoyim Rishon b'Shabbos, Sheni b'Shabbos, by us reciting the Yom daily, so we mention it as Rishon b'Shabbos or Sheni b'Shabbos or whatever day it is. By doing this, we are fulfilling a mitzvah that we are constantly referring to Shabbos. This shows us how great Shabbos is, and how a Yid is supposed to be preparing for Shabbos during the entire week. Famous quotation in Chazal, Misha Tarach be'erev Shabbos, Yechol b'Shabbos, the one who has prepared on Friday. In other words, it doesn't necessarily mean Friday, it means during the entire week. He has done the proper preparations, he can go ahead and he has Shabbos, what he needs. On the other hand, we have an expression that comes Shabbos, a Yid is in the position of Kilu Kol Malachtecha Asuyach. He has nothing to do with Malach at all. He looks at it like everything is complete. He's not involved in any Malacha whatsoever. He has to look like he has no shaykhs to any type of preparation. He's higher than all of that. Kilu Kol Malachtecha Asuyach, all of his work, all of his Malacha is done for him. And in Shabbos we have even a yet higher Madrege. Have the Madreges we recite in davening, Chemdas Yomim Oisei Karasa. What's the pshat Chemdas Yomim Oisei Karasa? Chemdas Yomim means it's the chosen of all days. It's an meaning of Chemda. Chemda reflects the meaning of a hava, of a special love. In other words, this is a special love which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is expressing to the Yom HaShabbos, which this is a yet higher Madrega to Shabbos. So we find various levels in Shabbos. And here the Rebbe again came to the same sachakel, to the same total, that though we have all of these great inyanim which Shabbos gives us, in addition to the preparations which we ourselves do during the entire week, however, what does Shabbos demand from us? What does all this demand from us? And where is it reflected that all of these inyanim have had a proper hashpah on us? All of this is reflected in Hamaisa Huayika. It's not stressing that the main thing what counts is the deed and action. And this is where we see if all of the inyanim, how high and great they may be, they are reflected properly. We see all this in the ma'asim which a Yid goes ahead and does afterwards. In the Farbrengen, as usual, the Rebbe learns Iraqi in the Farbrengen, also in Mishnah and Pirkei Avos. As it's customary recently, that the Rebbe also says a sikha regarding the Shir of Rambam, which is the daily Shir of the Rambam. However, today, regarding the Rambam, the Rebbe spoke with tremendous praise and satisfaction and gratitude for the fact that the new Sefer was published, which has Mara Mekoines on each and every halacha in the Rambam. It was a short while ago, Chamishasa Ba'ov in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe suggested that the Koilo should compose a Sefer which should give us the source of each and every halacha in the Rambam. Rebbe says it would be extremely helpful for us to learn Rambam if we would be able to have for every prat of the Rambam, because the Rambam, the Rebbe said then and he said it today, the Rambam does not say things of his own generally. When the Rambam would say something of his own, he would usually give an expression, yirali, it seems to me, or another type of word which is an indication that this is his own halacha. Everything which the Rambam says has a source, whether it may be in Gemara, in Medrash, in Mechilta, and in Sifri, Sifrot, Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi, everything has its source. And for us to have a proper understanding and be able to learn the Rambam better, it would be much more helpful for us if we were to have a sefer which would tell us briefly where each and every Mare Mokam on the Rambam is. Rabbi expressed himself, Ashrei Chelkam, V'godel Schusam, great is the schus of these people who were involved in putting together this sefer, and it was the Kollel who worked on it for the last 5 weeks, almost 5 weeks, and the Rebbe during the Farbrengen had the sefer on the table in front of him. The Rebbe said the fact that there may be other inyonim that are still lacking in the sefer should not bother anyone, because there will be a second edition where they will fill in an additional Mara Mekoimis and additional sources for the halachas and the Rambam. The Rebbe says this is something which people have an interest in finding, something which somebody else has missed out. The Rebbe explained, usually the Yetzer Hara does not let us learn. The Yetzer Hara interferes with our learning. However, when we sit down to learn, and we have some sort of an intention that we're not learning just because we want to learn Torah. We want to learn because we want to catch somebody else who has written a sefer, and perhaps we're going to be successful in finding Mekayres for halachas which they were not able to find. So to do this type of learning, even the Yetzer Hara will not interfere with us. So we can definitely go ahead and be sure that the people that have worked on the sefer also would not mind, and they would be more than glad to accept all these comments and all these additions, and this will be able to be published in the next Mahadura, on the next edition of the Sefer of Mara Mekoimis for the Rambam.
How did you do it so fast?
It was very hard.
I mean, they went through
The entire Yada Chazaka, every single halacha.
No.
I'll explain you later. There are Svarim that have it, and what they did was they composed them. They worked without a Svarim. Definitely did. The Rebbe says, interesting, that the Negei the Rambam, it has reached to us a letter which the Rambam himself writes, where he regrets the fact that he did not put Mara Mekoimes in the Yad HaChazaka of the Rambam. So here we had an opportunity to do something which was really the wish of the Rambam. And the truth is, the Rambam writes that he himself was confronted on various sources of the halachas. What is the source of various halachas which he wrote? And after he gave a response, he realized that he gave the wrong response, until he had to go back to the people and tell them the right source for this halacha. However, had he put sources into the Sefer itself, then he wouldn't have been confronted with such type of a problem. This is what the Rambam himself writes to us. And we're talking about a Sefer of Mishnah Torah, which is a Sefer of halachas, which, as the Rambam himself writes, this is a Sefer which is to give a person opportunity that after he has learned Chamisha Chumshe Torah, and one wants to become well-versed in all of the halachas of Torah, he can learn this Sefer. Memela, here, this tremendous thing was accomplished by adding Mara Mekoimes for this Sefer HaRambam. Before the Rebbe began talking this inyan about the Mara Mekoimes of the Rambam, Rebbe said everything by Yidden Bechlal is Bahashgocha Protis. Especially when we're talking today, the day of Chayel, we know it is the Baal Shem Tov who is known for introducing the Shita of Hashgocha Protis, not only b'negeya to the Min HaMedaber, as it was believed by Yidden until then, primarily based on the Meir Nevuchem and other Sifrei Chkira, that who is involved in Hashgacha Pratis, it is only the Min HaMedaber. The Baal Shem Tov introduced Min HaMedaber, man, person. The world is, Chassidus explains that the world is divided into 4 categories: Doimein, Sameach, Chai, and Medaber. So it was believed that the concept of Hashgacha Pratis applies only to the category of Medaber, speaking to people. However, the other categories of the universe are not affected with the concept of Hashgacha Pratis. The Baal Shem Tov introduced that Hashgacha Pratis applies to each and every one to such an extent that not only Chai, but even as the expression goes, and the Rebbe says this is an expression from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that when the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted to explain the philosophy of the Baal Shem Tov regarding Hashgacha Pratis, he would explain that even a leaf, when the leaf falls off a tree, and the leaf is being blown by the wind, how it should be blown, and how many times it should be blown, and where the leaf should wind up, all this is Hashgacha Pratis. So we see how everything which happens, the Yid comes across it, now lachas kama v'kama about an Indian of Torah mitzvahs, it is definitely Hashgacha Pratis. The Alter Rebbe was once questioned, the Rebbe went on, where do we have a source in Nigla for this shita of Hashgacha Pratis which the Baal Shem Tov introduced? And the Baal Shem Tov's response, the Alter Rebbe's response was that it is a Gemara. And it is a Gemara in Chum. Gemara tells us that there is a shalach. What kind of a creature, created thing is a shalach? So the Gemara explains, shalach is shoyle dogim in ayam. It is a type of bird which catches fish. Then the Gemara goes ahead. Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara tells us a ma'aseh, an episode, that Rabbi Yochanan ki hazeh chazeh shalach. When Rabbi Yochanan would see this shalach, he would comment, Mishpatecha tahoim rabba. Your mishpat. In other words, whom would he be referring to by Mishpatecha? To the Rabbeinu Shalom. That the Rabbeinu Shalom's mishpat, everything which is controlled by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even what this shalach is doing. So what do we see from this Gemara? That which fish he's going to catch, and how he's going to catch the fish, and all this can be defined as mishpatecha, the mishpatim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Mela, this is the source which the Alter Rebbe found b'negei balachayim. It doesn't define it b'negei the sameach, b'negei a leaf, but it definitely shows us different than people believed until then, that the inyan of Hashgacha Pratis applies only to people. Here we see that it applies even to fish and to all other types of things which were created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'meila we see how everything is by Hashgacha Pratis. Mentioning this inyan, how everything is to the most minute detail, is all by Hashgacha Pratis. The Rebbe referred to another episode, how the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe were once going for a walk, and the Frierdiker Rebbe, while he was walking with his father, just took a little leaf and ripped it off while walking, off a bush. So his father, the Rebbe Nishmaseiden, the Rebbe Rashab, criticized him for that and told him that he had no right doing it, it's not proper to do, because what he's actually doing is he's ripping off something from its chayis, from its source of life. So Rebbe explained what was the Frierdiker Rebbe's calculation. How did the Frierdiker Rebbe do something like that if, as his father told him, this is something which was not the right thing to do, how come he did it? Rebbe explained that at times we find people, when they are involved in a certain inyan, and in order for them to think properly, and they should be able to function properly, while walking they may have to rip off some leaves or so. It's not done with the intention of ripping off the leaves. This is something which is done for them to be able to involve in the inyanim of learning, or inyanim of chassidus, or whatever they may be involved in, as a means of a habit, and not even intending to do that, they would go and rip off a little leaf or so. The Rebbe compared it to the habit which many people have of smoking. And it goes to such an extent that they cannot function properly. Their minds cannot function properly if they don't smoke. It will hold them back from their thinking. It will hold them back from them to be able to develop and function their thoughts. Why? Because once they got into a habit that they have to come out to a cigarette and they have to smoke, the Rebbe says it goes to such an extent that the Shaila is brought and placed him. How is it regarding to Tisha B'Av? Is one permitted to smoke on Tisha B'Av or not? And it's all based on this thing that a person, once he got used to it, just cannot survive without it, and it means that he cannot function without it unless he will do it. The outcome, getting back to the Mara Mekaymes and the Rambam, Rebbe spoke that this is an extreme, great accomplishment, and it's something which he's sure that we will have further editions of it as well. But the Inyan in itself is a tremendous thing, and to show his appreciation and his love for this thing, the Rebbe says he will make a few comments regarding this sefer. The opening words of the Rambam in the Yad HaChazaka, the Rambam starts with a pasuk. The pasuk is a quotation of Tillah. Oz lei oivosh v'habiti al kol mitzvaysecha. I will not be embarrassed once I will look into all your mitzvahs. It is a pasuk, the Rebbe says it's a famous pasuk, because it's the Kapitel Kuf Yutes. And regarding Kapitel Kuf Yutes, the Rebbe tells us, the Alter Rebbe writes in Igeres HaKodesh, the end of the Igeres HaKodesh, that it is proper to recite this kapitel once a week. And that is why the Rebbe says there were many Yidden that would fear this, that Shabbos afternoon, in the time of Shalosh Shudas, in the time of Raiva the Raiven, it would be very appropriate to see many Yidden that would be sitting and reciting this kapitel of Kuf Yutes. The Rebbe added on, it was also the custom of his father that every Shabbos, late in the afternoon, after Mincha, he would see him reciting kapitel Kuf Yutes. And in this kapitel, we have this pasuk of Ozlei Eivosh B'Habiti El Kol Mitzvaysecha. And being that the Rambam writes this as the very first of his opening words of the Sefer, and in the Mara Mekaymes, they tell us the source of this kapitel, that it is in Tehillim Kuf Yutes. They also write in this Mara Mekaymes that in an old manuscript of the Rambam, in the Yemenite, in the Ksaviyat Taimon, in the Yemenite manuscript of the Rambam, there is something which was not repeated in later prints, but there they write that the Rambam wrote Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, Be'ezras Hakel HaToiv, if I remember correctly. In other words, the Rambam opened with a Baruch Hashem, which we know that whenever one begins something, it is proper to start it with a Baruch Hashem. But it says it is very strange why in the manuscript, the Yemenite manuscript, they do have that the Rambam began that way, and it's most appropriate to say, in all probability, that this is Taka how the Rambam began his chibur. Because we find even in further halachas of the Rambam, that the Rambam begins certain halachas with some sort of a praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if the Rambam does this, and further halachas, which are not the opening halachas of the Sefer, he would definitely do so in the opening of the Sefer. Why it was not put into later prints, and why we do not have it in our prints. But at least there is room to say that this manuscript, this Yemenite manuscript in Taimon, is accurate, that besides the Rambam beginning with the pasuk of Ozlei Eivosh B'Habiti El Kol Mitzvaysecha, the Rambam also began with a Be'ezras Hakel HaToiv. Towards the end of the Rambam, in Hilchas Malachim U'Melacha, which is the closing perik of the Rambam of the Sefer Yad HaChazaka, the Rambam there completes with a description of what the world will be like when Mashiach will come. There will be a time, the Rambam quotes the pasuk, that U'Malach Ha'aretz Beyas Hashem, everybody will be knowing godliness, Kamayim Layom Mechasim, just like water, Kamayim Layom Mechasim, just like something is covered with water, the entire world will be flooded with godliness. Firstly, the Rebbe mentioned, we noticed that the Rambam finishes his Sefer with a mem. This is appropriate that the Rambam is Marames for his name, Rambam, Rabbeinu Moshe. Furthermore, Rambam, when we write an abbreviation, we write Reish Mem Beis Shloss Mem. This is how the Minig Yisrael is to write Rambam. Though Rambam could be written towards the end without a Shloss Mem, because it's really not the end of a word. It's the first letter of Maimon, which could be written with a regular Mem. However, this is how Yidden have always been writing Rambam, Reish Mem Beis Shloss Mem. And the Rambam, at the end of his last words, puts in both Mems. Mola is there Hashem Kamayim Layom Mechasim. We have all Mems. The word Mechasim has a regular Mem and also has a Shloss Mem, which both of them, the regular Mem and the Mem Stuma, both correspond to the Rambam as we write Rambam today, a regular Mem and a Shloss Mem. In the Mara Mekoimes, they quote that this is taken from a Mechilta. And they write Mechilta Pei Tesvav. Rabbi says this is something which should have been written a little with more explanation. Because when you write Mechilta Pei Tesvav, someone may think it means Piska. Someone may think it applies to a certain pasuk Tesvav, or Peirik, and it's written up clear. And for especially if we want to give Ma'am Mekoimis for people who are not too familiar in looking up Mechiltas, and there may be Mechiltas that have different Trokim, one Peirik or another Peirik, the best way to put the source for this halach in the Rambam would be Mechilta, on this and this pasuk. So one who wants to look up the Mechilta, he will look to the pasuk, and Menela, once he finds the pasuk, he will be able to find the Mechilta easily. Because we would also like to add one thing. It is known that the Rambam had a shaykhis to Pnimi Yisatayra, and this inyan, that what the world will be like when Mashiach will come, and explaining it based on the pasuk of Mola Ha'oretz Deyas Hashem Kamayim Layom Mechasim, this is discussed in Zayah Bereshis at length, in many occasions, tying in this pasuk of a Mola Ha'oretz Deyah to the tkufa, to the period of when Mashiach will come. And therefore the Rebbe says it would have been very appropriate that they should also have mentioned to refer to the Zayah and Bereshis, because this also has a shaykhas to these inyanim. Again, the Rebbe expressed great thankfulness for preparing this sefer. The Rebbe said one may say, why is there an Indian in writing such svarim among the Mekaymes? It would be actually much better if a person can sit and learn this time and be mechadish chidushim, rather than putting in time and spending time to write Ma'am Mekaymes to sources for the halachas and the Rambam for those that cannot find the source of the halacha. The Rebbe says it is definitely not so, because by writing these Ma'am Mekaymes, they are considered mizakei harabim. They have brought and helped, done a schus for the public. And the Chazal tell us the great rewards which are waiting for those people who have done such tremendous accomplishments for the entire public. In other words, not something which they've done for oneself or for a limited group of people. This is an accomplishment which has been done for many people. And therefore the reward for such type of work is a very great one. And Rebbe phrased, and he said this would definitely lead to much more learning of the Rambam and much better understanding of the Rambam. The Rebbe says the truth is that we find that the real Noisei Klei HaRambam, that's the expression which is used regarding commentaries on the Rambam, all are in this habit that when they quote a halacha from the Rambam and they explain a halacha from the Rambam, they always give the source of the Rambam. Here, incidentally, the Rebbe mentioned something which he has been talking about numerous occasions, the derech of learning Rambam, that the Rambam really was written in a very pashtustic and a very simple way. And this is the real intention of the Rambam. This is what the Rambam wants. He wants it to be accessible to everybody, and everybody should be able to have a clear understanding of all the halachas from the Sefer HaRambam. This is exactly what the Rambam wants. The Rebbe criticizes those that go ahead and build entire pulpulim and learning and tie it into a Rambam at the time and has no shaykhus whatsoever to the Rambam. This is definitely not what the Rambam's intention was. The Rambam's intention is to give out in Yonim, spell out everything real clear so that we should all understand properly and have a proper understanding in all of the mitzvahs. And therefore we find those authentic commentaries on the Rambam, the real Noisei Klei HaRambam, are also in the habit that whenever they quote a halacha from the Rambam, they always tell us the source for this halacha. Regarding the Rashi, which the Rebbe learned in today's Sedre, in Parshas Kisavoy, right away at the beginning of the Sedre, the Rebbe gave us a long introduction today again, how Rashi's derech is that wherever there is something which is not understood in Pshuta Shel Mikra, Rashi comments on it. Rashi has to give us a ha'ara. The Rebbe explained, a ha'ara usually means a comment. Ha'ara meaning a comment is spelled Hey Ayin Reish Hey. The Rebbe says Rashi gives a ha'ara meaning a comment. Rashi also gives us a ha'ara with an aleph. Hey Aleph Reish Hey. In other words, Rashi brings light. Meloshen Oyer, Meloshen Lichtigkeit. Rashi brings light to this inyan, because this is an inyan which requires interpretation. There's something which is not glatik, which is not smooth in Pshuta Shel Mikra, and therefore Rashi is giving an interpretation on this inyan. Also the Rebbe said when Rashi gives an interpretation, if we were to have a similar type of question which would arise in Chumash many times, where would Rashi give us this explanation? The very first time. Why? Because this is the first time a child who's learning Chumash is confronted with this type of a problem. Rashi explains it. We go further. There's no need for Rashi to stress it each and every time, because we can always refer to the interpretation which we've already gotten from Rashi. Torah begins in this week's Sedre, V'hoya kisavei al haaretz. We will come into Eretz Yisrael. What will happen? In other words, when is this mitzvah of Bikurim? Once we enter Eretz Yisrael, we're obligated to bring Bikurim. Torah here is talking, once the Yidden will enter Eretz Yisrael. Do you know how long it took from them entering Eretz Yisrael till they had a chance to bring Bikurim? It took a tremendous amount of years. It took them 7 years to conquer Eretz Yisrael, 7 years to divide Eretz Yisrael, and we're not finished. Once they already were successful in planting fruits, and the fruits grew, we know that there's an inyan of Orla, which means that for the first 3 years we're not allowed to do anything with the fruit. After the first 3 years we have Netarevai, the 4th year when we're supposed to bring them to Yerushalayim. So after all of these years, that is when we will be able to bring Bikurim. Pasha starts, V'hoya kisavei al haaretz, and sort of right away goes over the Lakachta Mereishis Chol Pri Adam. Truth is, if we look back to the end of Parshas Kiseitze, there the Torah tells us about erasing and wiping out Amalek. Zocher es asher asa lecha Amalek. When do we have to do this mitzvah of Zocher es asher asa lecha Amalek? So as the pasuk says, the last pasuk of the Sedre, V'hoya v'haniach Hashem elekecha lecha mikol oyevecha misaviv. When Hashem will leave you free from all of your enemies, that is when you will go ahead and wipe out Amalek. When is that? After you have conquered Eretz Yisrael. After the Yidden have a melech on them. That's what the Gemara tells us. Once the Yidden have a melech, there's minu melech. And they're totally settled. That is when they are commanded to wipe out Zarish Amalek. So also it's a mitzvah which not right away they were mechuyev as soon as they entered Eretz Yisrael. V'niach Hashem elekecha lecha mikol oyevecha misaviv took quite a few years. It took quite a while. And again, Rashi does not comment or tell us that this is something which they had to wait quite a while till they were able to fulfill, wiping out, erasing Amalek totally. Another example which the Rebbe brought was in Parshas Bahar, where the Torah talks about Shemitah. And there it is also a type of an expression Daber b'nei Yisrael ki savoyu ala haaretz asher ani noisen lachem v'shofsu haaretz Shabbos l'Hashem. Once they will come into Eretz Yisrael, and right away they will have Shemitah. It's not once they came into Eretz Yisrael they had Shemitah. They had to plant for 6 years and grow for 6 years. And then once it planted and grew for 6 years, that is when they had Shemitah. So actually it's the same type of a question in each one of these psukim, where we are under the impression that something is going to happen right away, and it's really not happening right away. It's taking quite a few years in each of these specific things, and Rashi really does not comment that this is something which took quite a few years till they were able to get up to it. The Rebbe is learning. Back in all Rashi tells us on the pasuk of Ahoya Kisava is Magid Shaloi Nischayvu B'Bikurim Ad Shekavshu Ha'aretz, until they conquered the land of the Chalku and they divided it. So actually the pasuk should have said, there's no necessity to begin with the Ahoya Kisava Ha'aretz. Should have been a different structure of psukim. Structure of psukim should have been that once you're settled in Eretz Yisrael and not getting involved in such an arichas of pasuk Aleph, then you will go v'lokachta mereishis kol pri adam. The Rabbi is explaining that really the pasuk. Just to explain regarding to the pasuk here, it's pasuk in Parshas Kisavai. Pasuk here is telling us v'hoya Kisavai la'aretz asher Hashem Elokecha meislu chanach. Number one, you're entering Eretz Yisrael. Then the pasuk is telling us other things which we have to do, and not like those which v'yirishta. There's another mitzvah we have to do. We have to come into Eretz Yisrael, and we have to conquer Eretz Yisrael. The only thing is, we are used to, when we learn psukim, we have sources for various mitzvahs. The source of the mitzvah of conquering Eretz Yisrael is not here. It has been discussed in other psukim also. But it is repeated here as well. And the pasuk here tells us, v'yirishta, you're obligated to go ahead and conquer Eretz Yisrael. Which this is the Zayin Shekivshu. These are the 7 years of conquering Eretz Yisrael. Then the pasuk tells us there's another inyan. There's another mitzvah. In other words, the pasuk here is not jumping right away to tell us the mitzvah of Bikurim. The pasuk here is discussing several mitzvahs. The pasuk is telling us once we have entered Eretz Yisrael, we have a mitzvah to conquer Eretz Yisrael. We have another mitzvah once we have conquered Eretz Yisrael to divide Eretz Yisrael, which is the pasuk refers to in the word of Yashavtaba, which is another mitzvah. Once we have gone through all these mitzvahs, then we come to another mitzvah. What is the other mitzvah we come to afterwards? The lakachta mereishis kol pri adam. And there is no question why that the v'hoya kisavai are right away heading to Bikurim. The pasuk here is discussing other mitzvahs as well. V'yirishta, v'yashavta, which all of these are mitzvahs. An equal mitzvah to the mitzvah of bringing Bikurim. And that is why we find in Rashi, Magid Shaloi Nischayvu B'Bikurim, Rashi tells us, Ad Shekivshu Ha'aretz v'chalkuah. Rashi does not mention the fact that it took him 7 years for the war, for the battle, and it took him 7 years to divide Eretz Yisrael, because this is not what the pasuk here is out to tell us. The pasuk here is telling us the mitzvah of Yerusha Ha'aretz and the mitzvah of Yeshiva Ha'aretz. And therefore Rashi does not want to get involved in the fact that it took him 7 years to fulfill this mitzvah, because this is a mitzvah which, in other words, when we are told about this mitzvah, we were not told that this is something which is going to take us 7 years.
We don't know it right now anyway.
Now, okay, so now all we hear that this is a mitzvah that has to be done. Once we have done this mitzvah, these two mitzvahs, then we come to another mitzvah. We come to a mitzvah of v'lakachta mereishis kol pri adam. Regarding the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Rabbi explained that in Pirkei Avos it is customary during the Farbrengen, because the Farbrengen is already at Mincha time, and Pirkei Avos is recited after Mincha, so it's proper to discuss Mishnahs and Pirkei Avos during the Farbrengen. Rebbe says today we have Perek Gimel and Dalet, and the truth is, the Rebbe says, that when we have two prakim together, it's not the pshat that we have two prakim together this week and we'll have two prakim together next week because we are obligated to complete Pirkei Avos before Rosh Hashanah. The fact that we have the two prakim together is really much deeper than that. There's a deeper shaychus. It means that there's a shaychus between these two prakim. And therefore the Rebbe says he will find a Mishnah which has a shaychus one to another, sign the Mishnah Perek Gimel, sign the Mishnah Perek Dalet. And it's also based on the concept of Bikurim. It's also similar to the Indian of Bikurim, which we have just discussed as well. In Perik Shlishi there's a Mishnah. Bikurim, the Rebbe came with an introduction. In Bikurim, the Rebbe explained that there are three inyanim in Bikurim. There's the Chemdas Ha'aretz, there's the fact, the love of Eretz Yisrael, as we discussed earlier, the specialty of Eretz Yisrael. Then we have the love of these special peiros that are mechuyev b'Bikurim. And once one of these special peiros has ripened, in other words, this is an additional chavivus. Once one of these peiros has ripened, that is when we go ahead and set this fruit aside, that we will accumulate several other fruit and bring all the fruit or wheat together to the Beis HaMikdash. The same we have a Mishnah which also deals, we have a few Mishnahs, a Mishnah in Perik Gimel and a Mishnah in Perik Daled, which deals with three inyanim. Mishnah, Hu Hayaimer, in Perik Gimel, Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem. How dear is man who was created with a tzelem, the image of HaKadosh Baruch. Then the Mishnah goes ahead. So this actually applies to everyone, all man who was created by HaKadosh Baruch. Then the Mishnah goes a step further. How dear are children to the Rebishter, are Yidden to the Rebishter, that they are considered Banim Lamokim. In other words, the Rebishter had created many nations. And all the nations are created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't come to say that the others aren't. However, what the Rebishter did was, he selected as an Am Segula Yidden from amongst all nations. So this shows the dearness, how dear Yidden are by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then we come to a third phase, which is Chavivin Yisrael Shenitan Lahem Klei Chemda, which is the third level of love, which was expressed to Yidden, the fact Yidden received the Klei Chemda. What is the Klei Chemda? That is the special gift of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah. So this made Yidden yet more, much more beloved in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the fact that they were the ones that accepted the Torah and not following the Torah. A similar Mishnah, which has also three various categories, we have in the fourth parak. In the fourth parak we have a Mishnah regarding the learning of Torah. Mishnah Hay. That there is a level in learning Torah, he's learning Torah so that he should be able to share with others. Then there's another level in learning Torah. He's learning Torah in order that he should be able, should know what to do. The Rebbe says, we are talking in Masechta Avos. So Masechta Avos is Milah de Chasidusa. In other words, Masechta Avos only tells us in Yonim which we are not mechuyev al pidin to do. It's beyond the obligation of din. So that is why the Mishnah here cannot tell us halay Torah for the sake of learning Torah. Because learning Torah for the sake of learning Torah, this is something which we are obligated to do as mitzvah Talmud Torah. We're mechuyev to learn Torah at every chance we have. A Yid is mechuyev to learn Torah. Memela, when the Mishnah here is getting involved, discussing various levels of learning Torah, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos cannot mention a level of one who's learning Torah for the sake of learning Torah. This has no shaykhs to Pirkei Avos. This is halach and Shulchan Aruch, that he has to learn Torah at every free moment that he has. However, here the Mishnah is talking two different levels. In addition to the inyan of general learning Torah, there are two other levels. There's a level of one who is learning Torah so that he should be able to share his learning with others. And there's the level of one who is learning Torah so that he should be able to he should be able to be familiarize himself and know how to fulfill all of their mitzvahs. Because how can we fulfill mitzvahs? If we learn, if we know how. Otherwise if we are lacking the knowledge how to fulfill a mitzvah, we don't know how to do a mitzvah. Discussing this inyan of haloimed al menas lasos. Here the Rebbe, lasos we usually teach to do. Here the Rebbe tied it in to what Chassidus stresses. There's a Chassidish taich based on an expression in Chazal, Ma'asin al Hatzdaka. Ma'asin al Hatzdaka means when we make someone give tzedakah. In other words, there's the contributor, and there's the one who is the master who is making him contribute, who's convincing him to contribute. There, the expression can be applied, Ma'asin ala tzedakah. In other words, here the Rebbe got into the whole inyan of haloimed al menas la'asos, meaning not only one who learns, that he should know for himself what to do, one who is learning so that he should be able to help other Yidden what to do. He should be able to reach out to other Yidden, those who are not as yet familiar and do not know exactly what they have to do as far as fulfilling mitzvahs. So this Yid is learning Torah, and not only is he learning Torah for himself and sharing the knowledge and holding it back for himself, and that he himself should know how to fulfill mitzvahs, he's a loimed al menas lasos, to be maaseh, to make others do the mitzvahs as well. And discussing this in the Rebbe referred to haloimed al menas lasos. In other words, he's convincing others, and this would apply, to convince others who as yet are not familiar and are not fluent and do not know how to fulfill all of the mitzvahs. And the same thing would apply to those who as yet are not close to Chassidus and don't have no shaykhs to Chassidus, and as yet, and therefore it is our obligation to reach out to them with the mayon, with the well of Chassidus, and bring the well of Chassidus to them, and that they should get close to Chassidus as well. I don't know if it was here or elsewhere in the Farbrengen, where the Rebbe explained the greatness of a well, the Negea Tahara. Normally a mikveh is metaher. However, it is discussed in Hilchas Mikvahs that a well water has a stronger power even than mikveh water. There are certain tumas which a mikveh cannot make one pure from, and only a well can. And the Rebbe, and the Rebbe brought an example, a spring, right? A mayon. Okay, spring. Thank you. And the Rebbe brought an example that if a mayon goes through a mikveh, water from a mayon flows through a mikveh and does not remain there, but passes on, a part of the water did remain in the mikveh. It changed the status of the mikveh, and the mikveh gets the power of a main mayon, gets the power of mayim chayim, of a mayon. Getting back to the Nimshal, we are talking here about a mayon, the well of Chassidus. And these mayonas Chassidus, to bring it and share it with those Yidden who as yet do not have it. The Rebbe related a very interesting episode from the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe in his young days was traveling, and the Alter Rebbe came into a city where there were many misnagdim. A city which at that time was not close and friendly to Hasidus at all. And the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe went on a bimah, went onto the platform, podium of the shul, and the Alter Rebbe quoted the pasuk, Tamu ura'u ki toiv Hashem. The Alter Rebbe touched up the pasuk simply in Yiddish. And he said, Versucht wird ihr sehen, taste and you will see that der Rebishter is good, ki toiv Hashem, der Rebishter is good. And the Alter Rebbe that was all that the Alter Rebbe related to them. And these short words of the Alter Rebbe had such a strong impact on them that the Rebbe continued that tens of younger light who were tremendous Gaonim in learning and later turned out to be from the most leading and closest Chassidim to the Alter Rebbe attached themselves to the Alter Rebbe and ran after him and remained loyal Chassidim to the Alter Rebbe. So what do we see from all of this? That it is our obligation to be aloimed al manas lasos. In other words, lasos to the extent not only one should learn, that he himself should know what to do, but to be ma'asa, to be able to bring others to do as well. Talking about the importance of Chassidus and to reach out the wells of Chassidus and bring everyone closer to Chassidus and to familiarize Yidden with Chassidus, the Rebbe also added on that this is an inyan which is not only negea to men, it's an inyan which is negea to women as well. Of course, the Rambam writes, Ketzar hi aderech Rambam tells us, how does one become familiarized with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be able to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu and have proper fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It is all by learning and realizing the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is a mitzvah which not only men are mechuyev in this mitzvah, men and women alike are mechuyev in this mitzvah. Therefore the Rebbe says, being that through learning Chassidus, this brings us closer to be able to fulfill the mitzvahs of Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. The inyanim of learning Chassidus are not limited to men only. This is something to bring people close to Chassidus as well, and introduce them to the knowledge of Chassidus applies not only to men but to women as well. Talking about these inyanim, Rebbe also referred to several functions which will be taking place. One of them, a dinner for Koilel Chabad. The Rebbe spoke about the greatness of Koilel Chabad, which is at Stokke, helping Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. Rebbe said, going back even to something which was founded by the Alter Rebbe. We have the Igeres HaKodesh of the Alter Rebbe. We have letters which the Alter Rebbe writes regarding the greatness of the mitzvah of supporting poor people in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it's something extremely, extremely great and extremely chashav. Rebbe also spoke about a dinner which will be taking place for an organization which is involved with people who have left Russia. Shamir is the name of the organization. And the Rebbe says it's a tremendous thing which we see here. We see that people who are coming out of Russia, and this is a country which has been for more than 50 years campaigning against religion, and people that while being there, any religious observance which they had to do was done in total fear. And at the same time, these people come out here, and here we have an opportunity to work with them and acquaint them with more Yidiyas HaTorah and with more bringing them closer to mitzvahs. This is a tremendous and great mitzvah. It's a real outstanding Dava Gadol to be able to contribute for such an outstanding cause. Rabbi also spoke about the greatness of printing Tanyas. Rabbi spoke about it at many occasions. Rabbi said that there's someone present at the Farbrengen who will be going back to Eretz Yisrael in the near future, and he will have a shaykhs to the printing of the Tanyas. We sent along mashke from the Farbrengen to this great thing, and the Rabbi again spoke about the greatness of it, that in each city or town or community, wherever a Tanya is printed, not only should the Tanya be printed there, but immediately a Shia should be made with the residents of this particular area, involving them in the Limud HaTanya, and not only leaving them after the Shia, but also seeing to it that copies of the Tanyas which were printed in that specific city or wherever it may be should reach the residents of that city, should be left there, so that at further occasions they should also be able to refer to the Tanya and be able to learn in the Tanya. Early in the Farbrengen, Rebbe was discussing the comments of his father on the Zohar, and it was based on a pasuk in this week's Sedra, Ulesitcha Elyoin al Kol Hagoyim. And the Rebbe was telling us that his father explains this pasuk not in this week's Zohar, but in the Zohar of Pash Shlach. And the Rebbe got involved in interpretation on the pasuk and on the Zohar. But while talking about these inyanim, the Rebbe was talking about the greatness of influencing people of the world, that they should observe the Zayim mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And here the Rebbe says that there may be some individuals, people who are chaverim in yeshiva together, and one turned out to be a successful Talmud Chacham. He knows how to learn, and he learns well, and he's still learning, and so forth. His friend who did not succeed that much in Torah, but when he meets his other friend, is trying to show off for him that he has also been successful in life. What can he show off with? So he will show off with the type of carpeting he has in his house. And that Chazal tell us, Eize Isha Ksheira Sha'isa Retzayim Ba'ila, what's considered a Isha Ksheira, a proper woman, is the one who fulfills the wish of her husband. So he's showing his friend that he is an Ish Kosher. He is a proper man, that he has fulfilled the wish of his wife. And he's gone out and gotten her the type of carpeting that she would like, and the type of carpeting that she would be proud of and enjoy it. And this is what he is showing off with to his friend, to his colleague who they were once yeshiva chaverim. And at the same time Tavo was describing it at length, at the same time he's telling him how successful he's been, that really what he would really like to reach to is that he should be able to have the proper type of a car, and not that he should have to drive his car himself, but he should be able to have a chauffeur. And the type of car that he should have should also be a proper one. It should be a Cadillac. And the chauffeur who would be driving his car should not be stam a plain person, but should be a person who would be dressed properly and would be wearing a hat with all proper uniform, with all the buttons that are required. And this is what he's really heading to, and this is what he would really be proud of. Because his friend, who he was in yeshiva together with, has really been successful in Torah, and that's what his friend is proud of. And he never doesn't have what to show pride in, so he's trying to show at least that he has been successful in the materialistic inyanim, and this is what he's trying to show off with. The Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen. It is customary that any gathering, the point is that we really have to know what we should be proud with, and what is really nonsense, and does not require that we should be proud of. Very simple. No. It led from one Indian to another. He was talking that one would say he has other inyanim to be involved in, and therefore he is involved in different type of inyanim, and these inyanim don't seem important to him. That Minyan, he was leading into that. The Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen that it's brought in Svarim that any gathering of Yidden during the month of Elul, it is customary to wish a ksiva v'chasima tova, a happy and healthy and successful year. And particularly that this Farbrengen today is on Chai Elul. It is brought that from Chai Elul till Rosh Hashanah we are left with 12 days. Each of these days is for a different month of the year. In other words, Chai Elul, we are to correct all of the inyanim of Tishrei. Yites Elul, we are to correct all of the inyanim of Cheshvan and so forth. So today that it is Chai Elul, it is a day that has a shaykhus to the month of Tishrei, the past Tishrei. So therefore, let the Rebbe help that right away on Chai Elul, we should already be blessed with Ksiva v'Chsima Tova, and we should be able to dance into the new year. So the Rebbe expressed himself with a real joy and real simcha, and that the Rebbe should give each and every one of us a ksiva v'chasima tova in all of our inyanim. Just one second. Give Rabbi Afton our full attention.
One of the things the Rebbe spoke about Farbrengen, I don't know if it was mentioned, but in the middle, was the idea in today's, when he was speaking about the Ma'amekeimus that was made on the sake of the Rambam, in today's time it's important to make everything available to somebody. In Yiddishkeit, Svarim, to make it easier for the person. Although there's a mitzvah of Yadayka Matzasi, you have to work on it, but the Ma'amekeimus are made available, then you could start learning the Rambam the way you're supposed to. You have the Ma'amekeimus, you could check everything out. One of the latest projects we've begun is to have Rambam on the telephone. Now, basically what it is a chapter of Rambam a day, followed by Sefer Mitzvahs. Of what I've heard back and forth, keeping it short is, there were complaints, some people said there aren't enough telephone lines, and some people, it happens to be the Maggid Shias myself, so some people don't like the way I speak. We were getting it from Rabbi Sittin in California, but now it isn't showing up. They're planning on switching the whole thing on to our shoulders in New York. I don't know if any Wassermans from Crown Street did a few year. We're looking for different people to do year. But the basic thing which I wanted to bring out, the reason I chose this place was because 2 years ago when I spoke over here, that's when the Bergen started. When after the speech, some people said that if we started with the Bergen, they'd become involved. That started. A second thing that was mentioned, that if we start Sefer Maimon Yiddish, they'd get involved, and that was started. I decided maybe I'll make a chazaka with the Rambam, which we began already. The truth is, the way the story is now, to prepare tonight's parak is the second parak of Hilchos Erev. I don't know when another person prepares a shir. When I prepare a shir, it's at least 2-3 hours of preparation for a shir. Otherwise, it's just ibbatai. Could be some, now there's no question that especially in Halachas of Erev, and if any of you have listened to it, which from speaking to different people I know a number of you have, even if you'll follow it along, there will be parts that will be hard and it can never be explained till the the proper way, especially when we come in a month's time to help this Kiddush HaChedesh. I don't even know yet how it's going to fit into Shir 45 minutes. The way it is impossible to have a Shir longer than 45 minutes, both according to the way the answering machines are set up, and no one would anyways listen for an hour and a half. We tried to keep the Shir in between a half hour and 40 minutes. On our own, we undertook to start it, which was thousands of dollars to start. We bought this past week a tape deck with a microphone, with answering machines. The only way, the truth is, the only way we can expand it to have more lines. I wish I could put in 10 lines. I started with 3 lines, only being that if the demand is around, I just hope that the people would participate. And one of the ways is people could sponsor or whatever, but what the Rebbe said today by Farbrengen is we have to make things available. But the other point, there has to be you guys would suss it. You can't just give it on, Halvai could give it on a golden platter, the whole thing's expensive and everything, but the way it is, it's just impossible. I'm going to leave over here flyers about the Rambam. Last day from my mom Yiddish that came out, some of you saw it, and like a lot of you know, the Rebbe said to have books, that there should be a discount on Sfarim to Tishrei 40%, so we discounted all the books. Anyone has any further questions on that?
So for the thing about the leaf.